The carbon dating in all the area around Göbekli Tepe is somewhere around 12,000 years. Is that correct?
11,600 years ago.
Okay.
For decades, Göbekli Tepe stood as one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in the world. Situated in southeastern Turkey, this ancient complex has baffled scholars since its discovery in the 1990s. Dated to around 9,600 BCE, thousands of years before Stonehenge or the Egyptian pyramids, Göbekli Tepe redefined humanity's understanding of prehistory. It was not merely a primitive settlement, it was a massive megalithic site composed of monumental T-shaped pillars, circular stone enclosures, and intricate carvings that hinted at a sophisticated symbolic culture. The mystery only deepened over the years. Who built it? Why was it buried deliberately? And what was its purpose in an era long thought to consist only of small, nomadic hunter-gatherer groups? Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Now, a new wave of research combining advanced archaeological methods with breakthroughs in archaeoastronomy, anthropology, and ancient climate science has finally unraveled the core mystery of Göbekli Tepe. The revelations have shocked the global academic community and challenged many long-standing assumptions about early human civilization. At the heart of the discovery is the realization that Göbekli Tepe was not simply a ceremonial or religious center. It was a sophisticated astronomical observatory, a cultural nexus for multiple tribes, and most astonishingly, a catalyst for the birth of agriculture itself. The key to cracking the Göbekli Tepe mystery lay in the carvings. For years, researchers puzzled over the animals etched into the massive stone pillars: foxes, vultures, scorpions, snakes, wild boars. Many assumed these were decorative or mythological representations, but in 2024, a team led by Dr. Aylin Karaka from Istanbul University used a combination of LiDAR scanning and spectral analysis to digitally reconstruct the worn carvings. They then cross-referenced the animal motifs with celestial alignments visible from the site around 9,600 BCE. The result was nothing short of astonishing. The animals corresponded to constellations and planetary positions. The site was a prehistoric star map. Göbekli Tepe, it turns out, was constructed with intentional astronomical precision. Its enclosures align with the rising and setting points of stars like Sirius, Deneb, and the constellation of Scorpius during the Younger Dryas period, a time marked by dramatic climatic shifts. These alignments suggest that the builders were not only sky watchers but also kept meticulous records of celestial patterns, perhaps even using them to predict seasonal changes and natural phenomena. The implications are profound. This ancient society had a level of abstract thinking and mathematical knowledge previously thought impossible for the era. But the revelations didn't stop there. Archaeobotanical samples extracted from the lowest strata of the site revealed pollen and micro-remains of domesticated wheat strains, specifically einkorn, that predate known farming communities in the Fertile Crescent. This placed Göbekli Tepe at the very cusp of the Neolithic Revolution. In effect, the site may have been ground zero for the development of agriculture. The theory gaining traction is that the builders of Göbekli Tepe, previously thought to be purely nomadic foragers, were in fact experimenting with plant domestication and animal management on a localized scale. What was once believed to be the consequence of settled agricultural life, a monumental religious center, may instead have been the cause. In other words, the act of building Göbekli Tepe may have led to the birth of agriculture. The immense labor required to construct and maintain the site necessitated a stable food supply, which in turn may have driven early experiments in cultivating crops and taming wild animals. The previously accepted narrative, agriculture first, religion and monuments later, has been turned on its head. It now appears that ideology, ritual, and the need for shared cultural expressions may have spurred the very development of farming. This radical inversion of historical sequence has prompted scholars to reconsider the origins of human civilization itself. It challenges the reductionist view that necessity alone drives innovation. Instead, Göbekli Tepe presents a case where belief systems, mythologies, and communal gatherings sparked technological and agricultural revolutions. And this realization recontextualizes nearly every other early site around the world, from Catalhoyuk to Jericho, suggesting a far more complex interplay between mind, myth, and matter than previously understood. Further supporting this paradigm shift is the discovery of subterranean chambers and tunnels beneath the main enclosures. Ground-penetrating radar and seismic imaging, conducted in early 2025, revealed previously unknown sections of the site that appear to have functioned as storage pits and gathering halls. Organic residues on the walls, possibly beer made from early grains, suggest that Göbekli Tepe also served as a locus of feasting and seasonal celebration. These communal rituals may have played a crucial role in cementing social bonds among disparate groups. In a world without centralized governments or written language, the act of gathering around symbolic monuments and shared myths likely formed the glue that held early societies together. The deeper significance of this site's sudden burial adds yet another layer to the mystery. Göbekli Tepe was not abandoned to the elements. It was carefully backfilled with rubble and earth, a deliberate act that preserved its structures for millennia. Archaeologists now interpret this as a symbolic closing, perhaps a ritual farewell to an era or a sacred act of preservation. Some suggest that the closing of Göbekli Tepe coincided with the maturation of agricultural life and the shift to fully settled villages. As the function of the site became obsolete, it was honored and entombed like a revered ancestor. Equally compelling are the signs of intercultural exchange evident in the tools and materials found on site. Obsidian from far-off regions, seashells from distant coasts, and stylistic motifs not native to Anatolia indicate that Göbekli Tepe was not isolated. It served as a magnet for tribes across vast distances, a meeting ground, spiritual hub, and cultural melting pot. This intertribal cooperation on such an ambitious scale is unprecedented for the time and implies a form of proto-diplomacy that predates writing and kingship. One of the most jarring revelations came from DNA analysis of human remains buried nearby. Contrary to prior assumptions that early societies were composed of small, tightly knit kin groups, the genetic diversity at Göbekli Tepe suggests otherwise. Individuals from multiple lineages and even different ethnic backgrounds appear to have been buried in proximity. This diversity corroborates the idea that Göbekli Tepe was not a local shrine, but a regional center, possibly even an international pilgrimage site in prehistoric terms. As the excavation teams continue to work through the layers of earth and time, each new artifact adds a brushstroke to the portrait of a civilization that defies categorization. What Göbekli Tepe ultimately shows is that humans were capable of extraordinary feats of planning, cooperation, and abstract thought far earlier than anyone believed. It illustrates that spirituality, symbolism, and communal identity were not late developments, but rather the engines that drove early human progress. The impact of these discoveries has rippled across multiple disciplines. In anthropology, researchers are revising models of cultural evolution to account for the primacy of symbolic behavior. In archaeology, new methods of remote sensing and soil analysis are being applied to other sites in the Fertile Crescent in hopes of discovering more. Historians are now grappling with a richer, more nuanced view of prehistory that sees ideological and social drivers as equally potent as material needs. Public interest has surged, with documentaries, exhibitions, and even virtual reality reconstructions bringing the mysteries of Göbekli Tepe to a global audience. For many, the site embodies a kind of ancient truth, that human civilization was never just about survival, but about meaning, and in that pursuit of meaning, even our most ancient ancestors were willing to move mountains, literally. But perhaps the most profound shock comes from what Göbekli Tepe tells us about ourselves. It suggests that the need to connect, to create symbols, to look to the heavens and wonder. These are not modern traits, but deeply human ones, embedded in our DNA long before we had cities, books, or borders. It reminds us that civilization didn't start with technology or conquest, but with community, with myth, and with the stars. Göbekli Tepe has ceased to be just an archaeological puzzle. It has become a mirror, reflecting back to us the early sparks of creativity and cooperation that define the human spirit. As researchers continue to dig, not just into the earth, but into the very roots of our shared story, one thing becomes clear. We are not simply descendants of farmers or warriors. We are the heirs of dreamers, builders, and stargazers who, over 12,000 years ago, carved their legacy into stone and buried it beneath the sands of time, waiting patiently for us to rediscover it. The shockwaves created by the revelations at Göbekli Tepe have not subsided. In fact, With each passing season of excavation, the complexity of the site and what it tells us about the human past only deepens. As if the astronomical alignments and early agricultural experimentation weren't enough, new findings are now pushing the boundaries of how we define intelligence and creativity in the ancient world. Recent linguistic and symbolic analyses have uncovered evidence that Göbekli Tepe may have been part of an even older system of proto-writing or symbolic communication, a system that existed millennia before Sumerian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs. Etched on the T-shaped pillars and surrounding stone fragments are not merely carvings of animals or abstract symbols. Some of these symbols appear to be standardized across multiple enclosures, repeated in deliberate patterns, possibly functioning as markers of time, events, or cosmological beliefs. Researchers from the Max Planck Institute have begun mapping these motifs using deep learning algorithms to detect repetition, variation, and positional logic. Their findings suggest that these marks are not random. They convey structure, possibly narratives or ceremonial instructions encoded in a symbolic language. The implications are massive. For decades, scholars believed that written communication emerged from the practical needs of economic life, keeping track of trade, land, and labor in early urban societies. Göbekli Tepe flips that notion. If these symbolic systems represent an early form of communication, then it was spirituality, not economy, that birthed the earliest scripts. The builders were not accountants. They were priests, shamans, or storytellers encoding cosmology in stone long before ink ever touched clay. And this language may not have existed in isolation. Similar symbolic markings have now been identified at other sites across southeastern Anatolia and northern Mesopotamia. Karahan Tepe, a nearby and contemporaneous site, shares many architectural features with Göbekli Tepe, but also contains unique innovations, such as life-sized human statues and subterranean chambers carved with painstaking detail. The shared motifs suggest a regional cultural network that communicated ideas, techniques, and perhaps even spiritual doctrines across distances once thought impassable by pre-agricultural humans. Another breakthrough has come from bioarchaeological studies of tools and artifacts found in the refuse heaps and midden layers surrounding the site. Microscopic wear patterns on flint blades and bone tools suggest a diversity of uses far beyond what was originally assumed. Implements used in textile production, pigment application, and even surgery have been identified. Particularly startling was the discovery of obsidian scalpels showing traces of blood and tissue, suggesting rudimentary medical procedures. These were not people stumbling into civilization. They were experimenting, learning, and innovating in real time. Among the most haunting discoveries was a small, child-sized skeleton buried in a stone-lined pit beneath one of the enclosures, accompanied by carved amulets and animal bones. Isotopic analysis revealed that the child had been nourished on a mixed diet of wild and domesticated foods, while the burial context indicated special treatment, possibly even veneration. This suggests a belief system that not only encompassed celestial and ritual practices, but also placed profound emotional and spiritual importance on death and ancestry. It adds an emotional dimension to Göbekli Tepe's grandeur, the presence of grief, love, and remembrance. The emotional range inferred from the site adds depth to an already staggering intellectual and spiritual world. Göbekli Tepe wasn't simply a machine for measuring stars or managing harvest cycles. It was a theater of human emotion and imagination. The massive pillars may have functioned like sacred actors, silent, looming presences meant to convey continuity, power, and mystery. Their faceless T-shapes have puzzled archaeologists for decades, but recent theories propose they may have represented ancestral spirits or divine beings. Some even believe they echo a lost pantheon of gods predating all others, a spiritual scaffold upon which later religions would be built. Yet Göbekli Tepe is not just remarkable for what it holds, but also for what it lacks. There is no evidence of hierarchy, no signs of centralized control, kingship, or organized armies. Unlike later cities, Göbekli Tepe shows no palatial structures, no obvious symbols of coercive power. What it demonstrates instead is a model of collective effort, sustained over generations without oppression. This alone is earth-shattering. It suggests that large-scale cooperation and monumental creativity was possible without rigid social stratification. The people who came together to build Göbekli Tepe were not slaves or subjects. They were likely volunteers united by belief, myth, and a shared sense of wonder. Such unity might have been reinforced by rituals beyond what we can comprehend today. Alkaloids and tryptamines associated with plant species known to induce altered states of consciousness. Whether through fermented brews, smoked herbs, or ritual ingestion, it's now believed that some of the ceremonies at Göbekli Tepe involve deliberate consciousness alteration. This ties the site to shamanic traditions still seen in remote cultures today, and further cements the notion that early human societies were deeply invested in the metaphysical. One of the greatest surprises to emerge from these analyses is that these rituals were not secretive or isolated to elites. The arrangement of the site, with its circular enclosures, open spaces, and tiered access, implies community participation. Everyone may have taken part in these rites. These experiences may have served to dissolve personal identity, strengthen social cohesion, and reinforce cosmological understanding. The rituals at Göbekli Tepe weren't just performances. They were communal transformations, tools for shaping not just the world, but the self. Another layer of meaning is emerging through climatological studies of the region. The end of the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to warmer and wetter conditions after a period of global cooling, corresponds almost exactly with the initial phases of construction at Göbekli Tepe. This environmental transition would have created fertile landscapes and burgeoning wildlife populations, a paradise of abundance for early foragers. It may also have inspired awe and reverence. The monumental scale of the site could represent an act of gratitude, or perhaps an attempt to make sense of nature's sudden generosity. In either case, it reinforces the idea that Göbekli Tepe was not built out of desperation, but out of spiritual reverence. Recent advances in 3D modeling and AI simulation are now allowing researchers to reconstruct not just the structures, but the entire sensory environment of Göbekli Tepe as it might have been 12,000 years ago. Using data from pollen samples, weather reconstructions, and animal remains, scientists can simulate the flora, fauna, soundscape, and climate of the region. The aim is to recreate what someone standing at the center of one of the great stone circles would have seen, heard, and felt. The result is breathtaking. The chirp of birds, the rustle of wind through wild grasses, the scent of juniper and wild thyme, and above all, the towering pillars rising toward the stars under a sky unmarred by artificial light. This simulation work has allowed scholars to appreciate the emotional and psychological power of the site. To stand within those circles, surrounded by carvings that mirrored the heavens, would not have been a mere observational act. It would have been spiritual immersion. The architecture itself was designed to induce awe, to tilt the human mind toward the divine. The site was not just symbolic, it was experiential, a portal between the earthly and the cosmic. Now, perhaps most astonishing of all, a growing number of researchers are beginning to see Göbekli Tepe not only as a place of origin, but as a bridge, a link between the Paleolithic world and the civilizations that followed. Cultural elements visible in Göbekli Tepe, the animal symbolism, the sacred circles, the emphasis on stone carving, even the organization of space, resurface in later Mesopotamian, Levantine, and Anatolian traditions. Traces of its iconography ripple outward into the future, appearing in mythologies, religious iconography, and architectural blueprints for millennia to come. This makes Göbekli Tepe not just a marvel of the distant past, but an ancestral blueprint for civilization itself. It also forces modern society to reconsider its place in the long arc of history. For generations, we've been taught to view the ancient past as a slow, incremental rise from savagery to civilization. Göbekli Tepe destroys that notion. It shows us that in some ways, the most profound human breakthroughs, art, ritual, collaboration, storytelling, occurred not after cities and empires, but before them. That the very roots of who we are, our yearning for meaning, our ability to dream, to unite, to create, were already fully alive in a world untouched by electricity, engines, or written law. What Göbekli Tepe ultimately offers is not just knowledge, but perspective. A reminder that the ancient world was not silent or primitive. It was vibrant, intelligent, and awe-inspiring. That long before we built towers of steel or launched satellites into space, we gathered under the stars, carved gods into stone, and dreamed of our place in the cosmos. And that perhaps the truest measure of civilization isn't what we build, but why we build it. As scientists continue to uncover Göbekli Tepe's secrets, one thing is certain: the story is far from over. Beneath the dust of time lies a vast, still unfolding narrative of human potential, one that may hold even more surprises yet. In that sense, Göbekli Tepe remains what it has always been, not a monument to the past, but a message for the future. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Göbekli Tepe's mystery being finally solved now? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.